We're going to call the meeting to order, even though we have a few people that will probably show up, because we have to do the slate for the officers for the board of directors. This is April, and I will have Jean give us the slate for the board. We're going to do one vote.
You want me to do it now?
Yes, we can do it now.
For president, we are nominating.
Turn around.
For president, we are nominating. This is pretty much familiar names. We're nominating Shirley. For vice president, we're nominating Callie, who was in Callie Stone Solicity, who hasn't shown up yet, but she's going to. For treasurer, Polly Bartow, who's not able to make it tonight. For secretary, Jean Pottle, who was also absent. For archivist, Jean Hankins. There was some discussion of whether I was to be elected or appointed. I went back to the bylaws, and we're supposed to elect 2 archivists. So if anyone would like to nominate themselves, why?
Or a friend.
Would you like to nominate yourself?
Sure.
You would like to be archivist?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to be the archivist assistant.
All right. I would like to nominate Ethel Turner as co-archivist with Jean Hankins. Have I got everybody in?
I second that.
And secretary is Jean Pottle. I haven't finished yet. And then we have 2 directors. We are rolling these over. One is Denise Stern, and the other, if I'm right, is Alan
Douglas.
Yeah, right. And I think that's it. That's all we have to do. We have to approve those people.
I make a motion that we accept the nominations as presented.
Second.
Okay, is there a vote?
Yes, let's go.
Aye.
Anybody that says no to those? I guess we're all in. Even though those people are not here, some of you laughed, but we did check with them first, knowing they wouldn't be able to make the first meeting, so that it wouldn't look like we were putting them in there, out there, knowledge. I would like to give you just a real brief financial info, because we are at a point where we have finished the restoration project. Now it's maintenance. When you have a building, you have maintenance, right? So we would encourage you to pick up your membership envelope, or you can actually give it to one of the board members that are here tonight. But there's membership envelopes on the food table and on the table just before you go outside. And you can mail that to our treasurer, Polly Bartow. We encourage you to keep your membership up, because we still have things we're going to be doing. But I would like you to know what you've already done. Once again, we have taken in, for the restoration project in 4 years, $80,000 in grants. That's how much our grant committee brought in. You brought in $62,000, which is very good for Otisfield to have put $62,000 on the line to restore one of our beautiful historical buildings that we all voted in. Even though I'm a newbie to the area, I voted in that building. Can you believe that? That's how long ago we used to vote in there. The in-kind from the businesses in the local area gave as much, what would be equal to $41,000. These are round numbers. $41,000 came from our business people that helped us with the restoration. They would either diminish the price for us, or they would actually do work and not even charge us. So the in-kind business community has really helped a lot, and that's how we got it done. The reason I am bringing the attention to this is in our board meeting today, we have voted on and have made the decision of the parchment where all of you who gave donations, and I think it's about $100 up, but we have a list. So if you didn't give 100 and you feel guilty, you can give more. But we're going to have a list, and hopefully everybody, that we're not going to miss anybody, they're going to be on a parchment paper in a frame, and you will be able to see it. And if we're able to get it done by the next meeting in the townhouse, you'll be able to see your name there. It's too late to give money to the restoration project at this point, because it's done, right? The next meeting is June 16. It is going to be the Great Oaks Camp. And the next one after that's very important, which is July 3rd, the day before the 4th, is our Strawberry Festival. And the Bell Meeting House is having a concert, like we've done in the past. We're partnering with them. So around 4:30, you can come have your dessert, and then go up the hill and catch a concert. So I encourage all of you to have that on your schedule. Derek has put a little card with all of the events for the year. Our Facebook page, our web page, we would like you to like us on our Facebook, because we need, as a nonprofit, to get so many likes to be able to be properly in the system. So please like us on Facebook. We're going to disband with any secretary's report. We're going to call Henry Hamilton. Where'd he go? To introduce our guest speaker. And I see we have a few tools, so this ought to be fun to learn about how our ancestors forged this community that we're in. Thank you.
I've been asked to introduce Ed because I know Ed. About a dozen years ago, Ed was part of the team that built my house down the road a bit. I like to say that I think that that crew that built my house had to be one of the most highly educated crews ever built a house. The people who were pounding those nails and lifting those logs held a total of 4 graduate degrees and 2 undergraduate degrees. And Ed has one of those graduate degrees. History? Yes.
New England Studies, specifically.
And Steve, he put all that effort into a graduate degree in history, and now he's playing with wood and hammers and nails. Anyway. So, yes, so he's a historian. He's also a restoration expert. He's a window maker, and he has made himself a lot of the windows in the buildings he has restored. And some of his work includes the Scribner's Mills, the Rufus Sporting Museum in Bridgeton, and the Oxford Meeting House. He's going to talk to us. There's so many, when it comes to tools, there's so many different kinds of tools. I think he's going to be emphasizing tonight on joinery and timber framing.
Okay.
Yep. So, that's it. Come on up, Ed. And then Ed will talk to us 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to have a show and tell for people who brought tools to tell us what they brought, or maybe to ask you, what is this? Thank you.
Hi. I just was looking at the newsletter and it said I was talking about old farm tools. I could have brought some, but I didn't. I planned on woodworking. So, as Henry said, I'm a historian by training and a carpenter or woodworker by trade. And I restore old houses and barns mostly. So I was going to talk today a little bit about woodworking tools and kind of not history, but how woodworking's divided into different sections and things a little bit. There are 3 broad categories of woodworkers. There's carpenters, who generally work with wood and nails. That's how they hold their things together. There are joiners, who cut and fashion joints that hold the wood together. And then there are cabinet makers who often use dovetails, a little fancy joint, and then they cover it all and hide it to make a pretty surface or some particular thing. If you think of arts and craft furniture, that's more traditional joinery, where the joints are more visible. They're not trying to hide them, but they're just out there. And that's what I mostly do, whether it's making furniture, whether it's building something this size or bigger, doing timber framing. It's all joinery. You cut a hole in one piece of wood, and you cut a tenon or a tongue on the other, and you stick them together, and you use a peg to hold them. And when I do a window sash, and these are some parts for a window. You can see the profile in here with the little rabbit on the back for the glass, and then the tenons will fit in here, and I'll put them in, and I'll just use a little 1/4-inch dowel as a little piece of wood I carved. That's my peg for that. When I'm doing a timber frame, I use a piece of oak. You know, sometimes they're bigger, but usually they're 1 inch in diameter that I use for holding the timbers together. Traditionally, people used wood to hold things together because metal was expensive. It was rare, it was hard to find, it was, you know, you hear stories about people burning houses down to get the nails. I've never seen any documented case of that, but, you know, nails were, you know, metal was rare, and it was hard to get early on, and so people had to use wood. And actually, in many ways, it's better to use wood than it is to use metal, because metal rusts. It condenses moisture, and then that rots the wood. And so metal-connected pieces often, over time, work apart, where wood, unless it gets wet and rots, they all move together and they're compatible, so they, you know, it's a more solid joint. So, those were the 3 basic areas of woodworking, and then I was thinking about, well, how is woodworking broken down? And there are basically 3 parts to it. There's the wood, there's holding the wood so you can work on it, and then there are the tools that you work on it with. And so, if we go to getting wood, there are 3 basic ways of getting the wood you might use. The first would be splitting it. So here's some wood that it was just a log, and you can see I've split it. You know, this is a slice. I split this off before I came here, and that's a very simple, direct way to get a piece of wood. And now, for some things that's useful, for other things it's not so useful. This bench stool I'm sitting on, you know, this is exactly where it came from. Had a piece of wood, drilled a couple holes in it, whittled the legs out, stuck them together. Very basic. This shaving horse here, this is what I used to make it. You split the wood up into a piece the size you want to do it, and just a second. This is basically a fancy clamp. So, you sit down on it, you put the piece of wood here, you push with your foot, and it holds it. You can't move it. Then you just take your draw knife, and it's called a draw knife because it's a knife and you draw it towards you. And people always ask, is it dangerous? Well, if you hold it in 2 hands and you try and pull back, your body naturally stops right about there. So it's really hard to hurt yourself with this. Unless, of course, you're using 1 hand or something. So when children use it, and I let kids get on it, I put a little wooden bib on it so they can't hurt themselves, but I also say you always hold it with 2 hands, because that's much harder to hurt yourself. So anyway, you just pull, and you take your shavings off, and you can shape your wood that way. Now when you do this, you usually work with a green, because it's softer and it's easier to do. And so, when I make, let me see, and the harder you push, the harder you pull, the more you push with your foot, so it clamps tight. So it's a ergodynamic, you know, self-regulating clamp. And when you want to let go, you just move your foot, and then you can loosen it and flip it around. So it's very easy. Let's see. When I make chairs, I start with a piece of wood like that, and I whittle it down to a basic round cylinder. And I have another tool to assist with, and it's piece of wood with a series of holes, and as you work on it, you start sliding it through holes of different sizes so that you know it's to a certain diameter. And where's that?
There's one on the podium, is that what you're looking for?
Oh, thank you. So,
Wood walks.
this is a spindle for the back of a Windsor chair. And you can see it's a little wider here. It's down to 5/8 of an inch here, and then it comes down. And so I have different size holes that I can, as I'm working on it, I can slip it in and see if it fits, so that when I'm ready to make the chair, I know it's the exact right size I need. And so it's just a simple little piece of wood that guides me in doing this work. And when you do a chair, this is joined. You drill a hole, you put the tenon, the peg in, and then that's joinery. And so they're all different things that can be made, with the joinery. So let me see. I haven't. All right. Okay. So that's one way of getting wood, is splitting it and then working with it that way. Another way is you take a log and you hew it. And hewing, I don't have my broad axe with me, but I have it
Right over there.
Oh, there's a broad axe over here. Okay, good. So this is a broad axe. It's an axe. This is a broad hatchet. It's the same thing. If you look, you can see that the blades are flat on one side and have a bevel on the other side. And that's so that when you're working on a log, and let's say this is my log right here, I can stand on the side and I can chop down and get one side flat with it. And most barns were done that way. You have a large timber, and what you would do is you would put two logs sideways to hold it, like a little sawhorse, and then you roll your log on it, and that lifts it up a little bit. And then to hold it in place, you use a dog.
A what?
Dog.
A dog.
Yep, this is a dog. And you would have those cross pieces, and you would pound one end of the spike in and one into the log, and you can have 2 or 3 of these, depending on what you need, and you would basically staple your log into position, and then you can work on it without it moving. And then as you finish one side, you can roll it over and then refasten it. And so today, when most of the time when you think about woodworking, you think, well, you clamp the wood to something, and then you bring your tool, or you bring the wood to the tool, like a table saw or something like that. Well, when you're working with timber, you bring the tool to the wood. And so, and this helps hold the wood in place. And actually, if you look at old barns sometimes, they actually use these to reinforce joints. Where there's a timber frame joint, if it's moving or pulling apart a little, they'll staple one of these in to hold it in place. So, with the broad hatchet, you can hew your wood and you can shape a piece of wood that way. A third way of getting wood is with a saw. And when they came here, they didn't have sawmills, but they had pit saws. And a pit saw was literally a pit in the ground, and they would put the log over top of it, and a man would be in the pit. He was the pit man. And then someone would be up on the top of the log, and he was the tiller man. And the tiller man steered the saw through the cut to keep it in a straight line. And the pit man pulled and provided most of the power. And some of you who work with engines will know a pitman arm. And that comes from the pitman who pushes for an engine, you have the cylinder that goes up and down, and the pitman arm is what makes it go up and down, and that comes from pit sawing. After people were in this country for a while, they developed mills, and they got sash saws. Some of you have been to Scribner's Mill and have heard about that. A sash saw, or an up and down saw, was a very large version of this. And it was called a sash saw because it was like a window sash. It was framed like a window, and there were slots that it slid up and down, just like a window sash. And so this is just a hand one, but obviously the other ones were much bigger. And so you could saw wood that way. And then later, circular saws came into. They actually had circular saws for quite a while before they became common, but they were very small, and the technology, the metallurgy, wasn't good enough to make a large diameter saw that would stay together at the high speeds it was doing. And what happens is, as the saw blade goes, the metal stretches. And so if you make a flat piece of metal and spin it, it buckles on the edge. And so the saw doesn't work. And so they learned over time to actually, they make the saw like a dish. And that as it gets up to speed, it flattens out, and then you can saw with it.
Would you have just a guess for fun? If you crawl down to the basement, lay in the dark, and look up,
Yeah.
you can either see some logs with one side flat, or you can see some timber that have got straight lines on it, or you can see timber with circular.
Yep.
Can you just a guess of which half century?
Which what?
1790 versus
Well,
1900.
Circular saws became common 1850. But every town is different. So if you were going to be more specifically, you would have to go and do a little research in your local community and find out when the first circular saw came in, or when the last sash saw disappeared, to be able to determine some more specific local times. But in general, sash saws were used from 1700 or 1750 to 1850. 1850 on was more the circular saw. The pit saw looks like the up and down saw marks, except it's irregular. I didn't bring a piece of wood with me today, but the up and down saw, it's very regular, and the spacing is perfectly uniform. It went a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch every time, and looks it. Where a pit saw, well, they do a little here, and then it would tip a little, and then it would go back, and you can see the difference with that.
And the sash saw was water powered?
Often, yes, but it could be powered by a windmill.
Okay, but not by 4-man doing this.
No. The pit saw was, and now there are different kinds of pit saws. There's a frame pit saw, which looks like a big sash saw, or the most common was, you know what an ice saw looks like. Okay, well, imagine a little longer, a little thinner, and with finer teeth. That's what a pit saw would look like. And I know at Scribner's Mill, there's a framework that it's a trestle. And you can put a log on that, and instead of having a pit, you can put the log up and saw on that. And that was made by Bob Dunning many years ago. And he had a pit saw that they used for doing demonstrations and things. But I don't know of any other place that has a pit saw for that. So those are the 3 basic ways of getting wood. Then you have to hold it to work on it. And I've already mentioned the dogs, for when you're hewing larger timbers.
And how did the dog get called the dog? How did it get its name?
I don't know. But I do know there's a phrase, you dog something down. which is to tighten down or to fasten. But I don't know.
Non-environmental ship kind of.
Yeah, you would dog down the hatch. But I don't know where the dog, I'll have to look up that when I get home. So, give me a call sometime and remind me.
Okay,
I'll pull out my dictionary and look it up.
I'll see you again in the
Okay.
community somewhere.
So, let me see, so I was talking about folding logs. Okay, so, when you get past large timbers and just laying on the ground and having it held there, you get into things like sawhorses for lifting the work up, and then you can use shaving horse if you're doing something like, if you're making shingles, it was very common, you would split it. I didn't mention the fro. I am sorry. Okay, going back to splitting the wood. When you split the wood, you can split it with wedges for the larger pieces, but then when you get smaller, you use something called a fro. And I have
Saying throw, F-R-O?
F-R-O-E.
Oh, E.
Right. Don't know where that name came from either. But you would have a fro and you'd have a maul.
Oh,
And you put it in the middle of the middle. When you split, the split runs evenly if you put it in the middle, because the force, the strength of the wood is equal on both sides. If you push it to one side, it tends to run out. And people use that when they made shingles. They would put it, they would take a pine log or cedar, and then they would start working. The shingle fro is longer, it's about this long. And they would put it right next to the edge of the log, and come in half an inch or something, and they would split it and they'd pry, and it would gradually taper out to nothing. And then they would flip the log over, and they'd do the same on the other side. And you would flip it and just keep going, and you would get a set of shingles out of it that would be tapered like that. And then when you were done with that, you would sit in a shaving horse, and making shingles and shaving them was an old man's job. Somebody who still could do stuff but wasn't as strong as he used to be, he could do things like that, puttering in the shed or something. It was also winter work when you couldn't get out in the weather. And so you would sit and you would take the draw knife and you would just shave usually just one side of the shingle because the other side was hidden, so it didn't matter. And when you had everything to do by hand, you didn't do the back sides. And so if you look at old furniture, you'll very often see the bottoms or the backs of things aren't finished or aren't smooth because it was a whole lot of work. And so people just didn't do it. We have the shaving horses, and then a larger version, you have a workbench. That would be a big heavy table. And originally it was just a bench. Well, you had to hold the wood with the bench. And so they developed a series of assistants with that. A very basic thing is a bench hooks. And these fit just like this, and one side hooks on the edge of the bench, and you could take your piece of wood you're working with, and you put it here, and you push it against this, and it's locked in place. So you could saw it, you could chisel, you could do whatever you wanted on it. And so you do that, then let's see. There's, honestly, I don't even know what it's called. But
rabbit.
You set it on your here, and you get another holding device. This is called the hold fast. And I have a little hole in my bench here, and you just slip it down this hole, and you just tap it in place. And the shaft is a little smaller than diameter of the hole. And when I hit it, it cocks it sideways and it wedges in place. So it holds it. And so if you were planing a board and you wanted to hold so you could work on the edge, that little V-notch, you stick the board right in there and it holds the edge of your board up so you can plane the edge of the board. And so if you need to change it, you just hit the back of it and then it's loose. So it's a very and then later on they became fancy and got vices and all those kinds of things. But you could do a lot of very nice work without anything except a couple basic things.
Or a wife.
Sorry?
A wife holds the board a lot at my house.
Okay, all right.
Have to have a lot of faith in the
Yeah.
husband with the
Yeah.
saw.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
How was this information conveyed to the worker? Did schools, word of mouth, books?
Apprentice. It could be father to son. It was not uncommon for that, but it was more common for children to work outside the family. Part of it was because sometimes they wanted to learn different trades, and part of it was because it gave them broader experience. Everybody did things differently, and so you would go learn from one person. And when you were an apprentice, you would work with one person. Then when you became a journeyman, you actually journeyed, and you often worked with different masters and learned different ways of doing things. And then eventually you became your own master, and you developed your own style. But so basically, people would do this as an apprenticeship, and they would work with someone for a while, and they would start doing the grunt work, and then gradually learn more advanced things. So, okay. So, and this is another set. Another bench I have that I built. I drilled a series of holes down the bench, and I could put these pegs in it, and then using wedges, I could have 2 or 3 pegs scattered around, put whatever I'm working on, and then just wedge it into place so I could work on it, or I could do some carving or something, again, without having a vise or anything, just some very simple things, just to hold it in place. Let me see. Oh, there's clamps and then vices. Obviously would also hold. So then we kind of get more to the tools that you would use for woodworking. And the basic one would be an axe or a chisel. And basically, most woodworking tools are some variation of an axe or a chisel. A plane is really a chisel that's held in a piece of wood, and it only sticks out so far, so you can it's just controlled. But everything you can do with a plane, you could do with a chisel if you were very good at it. And so the more evolved the tools became, the less skill it took to use them. Like today with machinery, you flip a switch, push it through, and you don't have to keep things straight. The machine does all that work for you. Where back in the day, you had to know how to do things. So, let's see. This is big chisel. A chisel is actually a tool that's meant to be hit with a hammer. This you never hit with a hammer. This is a slick. And this actually is more like a plane because you push it, and the weight of this lets you shave the wood with it. And you can take very, very fine shavings and just clean up edges. Or split the wood out if the grain's going in the wrong direction. But so when I did boat building, I would use this for cleaning up cuts I had made. and it's so let's see, what else do I have in here? So I have some planes here, and these are some. Well, actually, okay. We'll talk about windows for a moment. This is called a sash plane, and if you look, you can come up later and take a look closer if you want. There's a part of the blade that cuts the rabbet, the part where the glass goes in. There's a part of the blade that cuts the profile, the shape that you see on the inside of the house, and then there's a flat part in the middle that makes the flat of the window, of the sash. And by using this, you can make, you clamp your pieces down, and you can make the profile of the window, and then you have to cut the tenons and mortises to join the sash together. And it's easy to make the big pieces. When you make the mutton, the rails, or the small pieces, there are different ways that they did this. Today, when I make a window, I start with a piece of wood this size, and I have a special bench support that I clamp to my bench, and it's got 3 little slots in it that you can put the square piece of wood in, then you roll it over and it holds this, and then you can, I guess 2 slots. And so you can make both profiles with it. And but in the old days, they would actually make one side and then they would saw it down, and then they would shape the other side with the blade for that. And then they would use chisels to cut the mortise, the hole here. That I don't see my small pieces here. And this is a nice little chest that I made, and this is actually not joinery, this is carpentry. Because there are no joints really in it. It's just pieces of wood that are nailed together. And so it's a nice piece of furniture, but it's not joinery, how I would say it. So I guess I've been about half an hour. Does anybody have any? I know I bounced around a little bit over things. If I've left anything unclear and anybody has any questions, feel free to.
What's the difference between putting your sashes together, I can't remember the term that you used, and something like what the shapers would commonly use called dovetail? Is it one and the same thing?
It's not one and the same. It's a dovetail. I was going to bring something I had made with dovetails in, but I didn't bring it. Dovetail is okay. The easiest way to explain it is, okay, this chest, I cut a rabbet in one corner here, so it's just a little slot that helps hold the boards together, and then I nail them. And so they go together and they make this box. Now dovetail, the grain of this wood goes this way, the grain of this goes this way. So if the wood expands and contracts a lot, it's eventually going to split because the wood's moving in different directions. A better way of making a chest is you have the wood going all in the same direction. And that's where dovetails become really helpful, is a dovetail is, well, basically one, it makes one's a triangular shape, and 2 triangular shapes make what's the dove's tail. It looks like a spread tail of a bird, and that's how it got its name. And that's for cabinetry. When you make that chest, then the wood movement is much more controlled, and you can put veneer and fancy things on it. You don't have to. You can just use simple things like, because the Shakers didn't do fancy veneer work and things, but the dovetail is for making chests usually, or a drawer. That's basically a chest without a lid, and so that's where dovetails are really helpful. And when I'm doing this, I'm just making a square frame with the tenons and the mortises that will go together, and it just makes, this is a door, a window, anything that you could just make, you could just put a couple of boards and make that like an old batten door, but the problem is that the wood will swell, and so sometimes it'll be tight and sometimes it'll be loose. And making a frame like this, the wood only expands in this direction, not lengthwise. And so by having the window sash like this, the only way the window can get wider is a little bit of this movement, a little bit of this movement, and this major length doesn't move. And so windows stay stable that way, and doors stay stable. That's why they use this type of construction. And so today you can get a piece of plywood, and it has wood in this direction and this direction, and it's more stable. But solid wood expands and contracts across the grain.
So plywood is more stable than solid wood?
It is, yes. It is more dimensionally stable because it doesn't expand and contract as much in moisture.
Is that because it's all?
Because it has.
It's not straight.
It
or
has.
down, it's all
It has.
over the place.
Well, but it has a layers this way, a layer this way, a layer this way, a layer this way, and it's all glued together. And as long as that glue holds, that structure is fairly stable. So, yes.
Can you talk about glue and finishes of the period?
Well, the basic glue of the period was hide glue, which is actually, it's made from hide. It's also made from bones and other things. They basically take it and boil it, and it makes a very, it's almost like gelatin. If you've ever cooked chicken or something and you have the juices left and it all congeals, well, that's starting to get to be some kind of a hide glue. If you cooked it down more, you could get something like that. And so it's actually fairly strong, but it dissolves in water or heat. Heat will help, soften it. So it's not the most stable, but it's a fairly strong glue. But if you're doing a mortise and tenon, you use a peg and it pins it in place, and that you don't have to worry about glue for that. The finishes, they had oil-based paints, and they had basic varnishes and things that they could, and linseed oil was very common as just an oil finish or as part of paint or something that they use.
Were these things that the people made themselves, or was there a supporting industry that allowed them to purchase the materials?
Yes. Usually people did not make linseed oil at home, but there might, if you were in a larger community. Linseed oil is flaxseed, and it's called linseed oil. Well, I'm not sure why, whether flax or linen came first, but linen is made from flax, and so linseed and flax are the same plant, and like any seed, any oil seed, you can crush it up and press it, and oil comes out. And to get it to dry better, you you boil it, and you could literally heat it, and it would make it dry faster. Or today, they may boil it, but they also add some chemical dryers that are heavy metals that you put in there, that it helps the oil oxidize. It combines with oxygen, and it hardens and makes a film. And so that was the most common kind of finish with that. And as far as the paints go, there's a reason why barns were painted barn red. It was real cheap, because basically it was dirt. You got a special kind of red clay, dried it, ground it up, mixed it in with your oil, and put it on. Often, if you were a farmer and you wanted to make some paint, you would use milk. Milk has proteins in it that as it dries, they harden. And you can mix color or pigments in it. And back before there was refrigeration, milk spoiled. And so you would take your milk, you would separate the cream, you would make butter with the cream, and you put some salt in the butter, and that stores the butter so it stays fresh. But you can't do anything with the milk because you know it's going to spoil in a couple of days when it gets warm. So you feed it to pigs, or you make paint with it. And so milk was a cheap base for paint, and you would get some kind of earth pigment that you would mix into it, and you would paint your buildings with it.
We've been working on Bell Hill Steeple this last 6 months or better. And it's the belfry decking where the bell carriage sits.
Yeah.
And it's had several layers of rebuilding sometimes, built in 1839. And we went through a couple of metals, tin and maybe lead, I don't know.
Lead or copper was often used.
Yeah, and then when they got down to the very first finishing, it was pitch. It was a pitch material. They apparently spread a layer of pitch and then a layer of fabric or paper, and then another coat of pitch, and that was the roofing. That was it.
I've never heard of that as roofing, but it's a common, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Likely pine tar.
Yeah, it could be pine tar. I mean, pitch is pine tar, or is pine pitch. And so yes, that certainly could be something they did.
It was there a long time before it failed, I guess.
Yeah.
So do people want everybody to listen as he goes and looks at the different things that were brought? Or do you want to?
Well, I think that the people who brought them are going to present both.
Okay.
Ed made.
Okay, we can do that, however, and if people want to come up and look at my tools, they're welcome to as well.
So Elaine Double Barrel brought that thing over there that looks like it's going to play music or something.
It's a root cutter, and Ed was telling me that in the country in the farm where he worked, that there was a larger one like that. And what was it, beets that you said that?
They fed beets to animals, and this, if you look, probably be easier to come up and take a look.
Come on up and look
there's
at
a
my
large
root
cutter.
cutter.
What are the spinning?
Lace spinners?
Cuisinarts.
Oh.
Okay, they've got a blade that spins around and cuts vegetables. That's all this is, just by hand.
Cuisinart.
It's a Cuisinart. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, if you come look, you can see, I don't know if you can see in here, you can see the blade, you can see the little slots where, yeah, that's all it is.
It was in our garage when we bought the place in '77, and I just liked to look at it, so I brought it and put it in my kitchen.
So the next time you're serving carrot salad, just throw your carrots in there.
So I read, my great-grandfather did some woodworking, and my stepfather, Henry, figured out that this was a shaper, and it So he was looking at it, so it's got these small blades, and it looks like it's two, you could do two different
Yep.
pieces. Yeah, so
Yep.
one is straight, and it's just this really fine thing, like I might have cut myself if I did it wrong. But it's the same sort of concept as what he was doing with his big
Yep.
thing, that is just a little one for very fine detail work.
Yep, this is a spoke shave.
A spoke
And it
shape.
was literally for making spokes on a wheel.
Ah,
But you have a straight one and you have a round one, and they make all different kinds, whether it's just round or just straight.
so this is for
And this is
making
a combination
wheel
one.
spokes.
Yep.
Interesting. And then the other thing that we cannot figure out what it is this.
Yes, and I don't know what it is. All right, this could be,
It does move back and forth.
Yeah.
We just,
this could be a homemade version, a homemade tool. Somebody had a specific thing and they just made it. It's very well made, and it may have some manufactured parts that they adapted to something, or it may be something manufactured and I have no idea what it is.
darn.
Did you tell them what your grandfather did?
So, well, and I don't think any of this stuff was for, my great-grandfather built, model ships.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of that was associated with it. Then I have a bunch of the small hand planners at home. Didn't bring those because I knew what they were.
Yep.
So, all right.
Somebody else brought a great big thing for doing dental, or Henry, you have some separate stuff? Yeah.
Well, I brought this, and I was going to ask who could tell me why this is flat on one side and bevel on the other, but Ed took
We
that.
know the answer.
Except that there's one problem with this.
Yeah.
The handle's wrong.
Yes, because I bought this, and I found an axe handle maker in Naples, and twisted his arm to make me an axe handle, and
Okay, but the handle's still wrong. Because,
Yeah,
and the reason why is because if you are working on the side of a log like this, and the handle is straight, you're going to hit your hand. So a broad axe that was really used for hewing timbers, usually the simple ones have a handle that comes out and then it just bends a little bit. Some of the fancy